In this episode, we're going to take the big idea of governance and make it feel like a practical choice instead of a vague corporate word. For a beginner, governance can sound like something that happens in boardrooms and policy binders. But in a privacy program, governance is simply how decisions get made, who is allowed to make them, and how the organization proves that privacy is being managed consistently. The Certified Information Privacy Manager, CIPM, exam cares about governance models because privacy work crosses many teams, and without a clear model, you get confusion, delays, and inconsistent handling of personal information. The trick is that there is no single perfect governance model for every organization, because the right model depends on privacy maturity, meaning how developed the organization's privacy capabilities are today. We're going to learn how to recognize maturity signals and choose a governance approach that fits, so the program can function now and evolve over time. By the end, you should be able to look at a scenario and say, given this organization's maturity, this governance model is the best fit, and here is why. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Let's start by defining governance in plain language, because you need a steady definition to keep your thinking clean. Governance is the system that sets decision rights, accountability, oversight, and escalation for privacy, so privacy is not left to personal judgment or last-minute debates. In practice, governance answers questions like who approves a new data use, who resolves conflicts between teams, who owns policy updates, and who decides when a risk is acceptable. Governance also includes how the organization monitors compliance with its own privacy rules and how it responds when gaps are found. Without governance, privacy becomes inconsistent, which is dangerous because inconsistency is what creates surprise processing, missed obligations, and avoidable harm. Governance is not just about control. It is also about reducing friction by making expectations predictable, so teams can move faster without reinventing decisions every time. When you view governance as a decision system, you stop seeing it as overhead and start seeing it as the mechanism that makes privacy scalable. That is the mindset the exam is testing, because privacy program management is fundamentally about running a cross-functional system. Now let's define maturity, because it is the lens that tells you which governance model is realistic. Privacy maturity describes how consistently an organization can manage personal information, including whether it has basic inventory, defined roles, documented policies, trained staff, repeatable processes, and measurement. Low maturity often means privacy work is reactive, handled by a few individuals, and dependent on informal relationships. Medium maturity usually means there is a defined privacy function, some documented processes, and some consistent checkpoints, but gaps still appear when new initiatives move quickly. Higher maturity means privacy is integrated into business processes, roles are well understood, risk assessments are routine, and metrics drive improvements over time. Maturity is not about being good or bad as a company. It is about how developed the system is. This matters because a governance model that requires strong processes and disciplined reporting will fail in a low-maturity environment, not because it is wrong, but because the foundation is not ready. The exam often tests whether you can pick something that will work in the described reality rather than something that sounds ideal on paper. A classic governance choice is between centralized and decentralized models, and the key is to understand what those words mean in privacy program terms. In a centralized model, a core privacy team or privacy office holds most decision rights, sets standards, and provides approvals, which can increase consistency and control. Centralization can be effective in low to medium maturity environments because it reduces ambiguity and creates a clear point of accountability. In a decentralized model, decision-making is distributed across business units, with local privacy leads or embedded champions making decisions within defined boundaries. Decentralization can scale better in large organizations and can reduce bottlenecks, but it requires stronger maturity because it relies on consistent understanding and discipline across many teams. Many organizations use a hybrid or federated model, which combines a central privacy function that sets direction and oversight with distributed roles that execute and make local decisions. The exam is rarely asking you to declare one model universally best. It is asking whether you can match the model to maturity, size, complexity, and risk profile. If you can explain the trade-offs calmly, you will be able to choose the best fit for the scenario. Let's make those trade-offs more concrete by focusing on what centralized governance gives you and what it costs you. Centralization typically gives faster consistency because one group defines rules, maintains artifacts, and controls approvals. It can also provide clearer accountability because when something goes wrong, the organization knows where ownership sits and can improve the system. Centralization can be especially helpful when obligations are complex, when the organization operates across multiple regions, or when leadership wants strong oversight during early program building. The cost is that centralization can create bottlenecks because one team becomes the gateway for many decisions, and bottlenecks create frustration and workarounds. Another cost is that central teams can become disconnected from real operational constraints, leading to policies that look good but are hard to execute. Centralization can also discourage local ownership if teams treat privacy as someone else's job, which limits maturity growth. A strong centralized model therefore needs good communication and practical integration with business processes, or it becomes a slow approval machine. When you see a scenario that describes chaos, inconsistent decisions, and unclear ownership, centralized governance often looks attractive because it stabilizes the system quickly. Now consider decentralized governance and why some organizations choose it, even though it sounds riskier at first. Decentralization can increase speed and responsiveness because local teams can make decisions without waiting for a central approval queue. It can also improve context awareness because local leads understand how data is used in their specific operations and can catch issues that a central team might miss. Decentralization can be a good fit when an organization is large, diverse, and operating across many product lines or regions, because a single central team may not be able to scale approvals and support fast enough. The cost is consistency risk, because different teams can interpret rules differently, leading to uneven privacy practices. Decentralization also increases the importance of training, standards, and monitoring, because distributed decision-makers need a shared playbook and accountability. If maturity is low, decentralization often turns into confusion where no one is sure who owns what, and privacy decisions become inconsistent. If maturity is higher, decentralization can work because the organization has clear standards, strong reporting, and a culture of disciplined execution. Exam questions that mention embedded privacy roles, strong business unit ownership, and established processes often hint that decentralization or a hybrid approach is possible. The federated or hybrid model is often the most realistic choice, and understanding why helps you answer nuanced exam questions. In a federated model, a central privacy function sets strategy, policies, standards, and oversight mechanisms, while privacy responsibilities are shared with designated leads in business units who implement controls and make decisions within boundaries. This approach can reduce bottlenecks because local decisions do not always require central approval, but it still maintains consistency through central standards and monitoring. It also supports maturity growth because business units build ownership while still receiving guidance and escalation paths. The risk is that hybrid models can become fuzzy if roles are not clearly defined, leading to duplication or gaps. The model only works if the organization invests in coordination, training, and reporting, and if the central function has enough authority to enforce standards. In a CIPM context, federated governance often aligns with the idea of privacy as an enterprise program, where many teams contribute but decision rights and accountability remain clear. When you see scenarios that describe some privacy capability already distributed but still needing stronger consistency, hybrid is often the best fit. To choose a governance model based on maturity, you need a way to recognize maturity signals in a scenario. If the scenario describes frequent surprises, missing documentation, inconsistent handling of requests, and privacy involvement late in projects, that suggests low maturity. In low maturity, the organization benefits from centralization because it provides a clear starting point and reduces uncontrolled variation. If the scenario describes defined policies, some assessment processes, and a privacy team that is involved but overloaded, that suggests medium maturity. In medium maturity, a federated model can help by keeping standards central while distributing execution and some decision-making to reduce bottlenecks. If the scenario describes consistent inventories, repeatable processes, established training, and clear local ownership, that suggests higher maturity. In higher maturity, decentralization or a mature federated model may work because the organization has the discipline to maintain consistency across distributed roles. The exam will often include clues like whether there are established checkpoints, whether metrics exist, whether roles are clear, and whether privacy decisions are documented. Your job is to use those clues to select a model that will function with the organization's current capabilities. Governance models also interact with organizational culture, which is part of maturity but deserves separate attention because culture can support or sabotage any model. In some organizations, centralized decision-making is normal and accepted, and teams expect to work through a central function for approvals. In others, business units strongly value autonomy, and a heavy centralized model will trigger resistance and workarounds. A privacy program manager has to account for those realities because governance that people refuse to follow is not governance, it is theater. Culture also affects how conflict is handled, because privacy decisions often involve trade-offs between marketing goals, product speed, legal obligations, and security constraints. A good governance model includes escalation paths and clear rules for resolving conflicts so debates do not become personal power struggles. If the culture is collaborative and process-oriented, a federated model can thrive because teams coordinate naturally. If the culture is fragmented or highly competitive internally, centralization may be necessary to prevent uneven practices and to force consistent minimum standards. Exam scenarios may hint at culture through phrases like lack of buy-in, repeated friction, or inconsistent adoption, and those are governance-relevant clues. Another important factor is the organization's size and complexity, because governance must scale. In a small organization, centralized governance may be simple and effective because a small number of leaders can coordinate quickly and the privacy team can have direct visibility into processing activities. In a large organization, pure centralization can become impractical because a single team cannot review every initiative without becoming a bottleneck. Large organizations often need distributed roles and local accountability, which pushes toward federated governance even if maturity is still developing. Complexity also includes the variety of products, the number of regions served, the number of vendors involved, and the speed of change, because these factors increase the number of privacy decisions that must be made. A governance model should be designed to handle the volume of decisions, not just the difficulty of decisions. This is why governance often includes risk tiering concepts, where higher risk activities require more oversight, while lower risk routine activities can follow standard procedures without heavy approvals. You do not need to label that as a specific framework to understand the idea. Scale requires selective attention and clear thresholds. If you connect governance to decision volume, you will choose models that make operational sense. Governance also depends on what kinds of decisions are being governed, because not all decisions need the same level of oversight. Strategic decisions include defining privacy principles, setting program goals, and determining what kinds of data use are acceptable. Tactical decisions include creating policies, establishing assessment requirements, and defining training expectations. Operational decisions include approving specific processing activities, handling exceptions, responding to rights requests, and managing incidents. A centralized model can hold strategic and tactical decision rights while distributing operational decision-making under defined standards, which is a common hybrid pattern. This is often the sweet spot for medium maturity because it keeps direction consistent while allowing local teams to execute efficiently. A key exam skill is recognizing when a scenario is about strategic governance versus operational execution, because the right model depends on which decision layer is struggling. If the scenario is about inconsistent daily decisions, distributing execution without strong central standards could worsen the problem. If the scenario is about central bottlenecks, distributing some operational decisions under clear rules could improve performance without sacrificing control. It is also helpful to think of governance as a set of mechanisms, not just an org chart choice, because two organizations can claim the same model but function very differently. Governance mechanisms include defined roles and responsibilities, approval workflows, escalation paths, policy maintenance processes, training requirements, risk assessment triggers, monitoring and auditing practices, and metrics reporting. A centralized model without strong mechanisms becomes a single, overwhelmed team. A decentralized model without strong mechanisms becomes chaos. A federated model without strong mechanisms becomes confusion about who owns what. This is why maturity is so important, because maturity is largely the presence of reliable mechanisms. Exam questions may ask what should be added to make a chosen model work, and the answer often involves clarifying decision rights, creating consistent standards, or strengthening monitoring and reporting. If you treat governance as mechanisms plus structure, you will avoid choosing answers that sound like simple reorganizations without operational support. Privacy governance succeeds when it produces consistent decisions, not when it looks neat. As we wrap up, remember that selecting a governance model is about fit, not ideology, and fit is driven by privacy maturity, culture, scale, and the kinds of decisions the organization must make. Centralized governance can stabilize low-maturity environments by creating clear accountability and consistent standards, but it can create bottlenecks and discourage local ownership if it is too heavy. Decentralized governance can scale and increase responsiveness, but it requires higher maturity, strong standards, and disciplined monitoring to prevent inconsistency. Federated governance often provides the best balance by keeping strategy, standards, and oversight central while distributing execution and local decision-making under defined boundaries. When you read exam scenarios, listen for maturity signals like role clarity, process consistency, training, inventories, and measurement, because those clues tell you what governance model will actually work. The exam is not asking you to pick the fanciest model. It is asking you to pick the one that can produce consistent, defensible privacy outcomes in the organization described. If you can explain the trade-offs in plain language and match the model to maturity, you will make stronger choices under pressure and you will understand governance as the practical engine of privacy program success.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.